So today, we're lucky to have Andy deGruchy. I was going to ask you before I came up here to make sure I pronounced it correctly. I was fascinated by his website and all the information about Limeworks, and he'll tell us a whole lot more and talk to us about, if you have any questions, he'll be happy to answer them. Thank you, Andy.
Well, thanks for having me. My name's Andy deGruchy. I live in Quakertown. Been there about 36 years. Grew up in Plymouth Meeting and then moved to Lansdale. When I was in high school, I had no clue what I wanted to do for a career when it was time to go to college, or didn't have any money for college. And so I thought, well, a lot of kids go undecided and take a big student loan. And I'm dating myself a little bit, but Dan Fogelberg was a guitarist, and I play the guitar. And he sang a song about his father being a cabinet maker's son. And that made me think, oh, this is kind of like a neat artsy thing. I think, what if you could do anything, what would you just want to wake up finding yourself doing one day? So I started thinking maybe a trade, and I took career study and went and tried some trades. And I didn't try masonry, but and I had no masonry experience. I'm not from a family of contractors. People hear my name deGruchy and think, oh, a good Italian stonemason, that type of thing. I have a little Italian in me. My mother's Italian, but my last name's a French name. But we were not from a long line of contractors. So anyway, I found on the career bulletin board at the school a free education at Williamson Trade School in Media, PA. And I thought, hey, the price is right, if you can get accepted. So they pick about 600, or they have about 600 applicants, and they will pick about 90 kids to receive a 3-year scholarship to live at this very old trade school, one of the oldest, I think it is the oldest private post-secondary free school, of course. Would definitely put it in its category of its own. School founded in 1888 by a philanthropist in Philadelphia area called, his name was Isaiah Van Sant Williamson. He was the equivalent of like $500 million in 1880s of today's money. And he liked what Stephen Girard did for the Girard College and orphans and teach them, give them a college education. But he said, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to teach them a trade. So the school, the reason it was free is that you do have to have a financial need, and you do have to have good references, and you do have to have some good grades and look like you're trying. And I was kind of trying a lot to be on the up and up in every way, and I got some great references, and I got accepted to the school. But the carpentry class, which I want to be a cabinet maker's son, that was full. So they said, well, my second choice, masonry. I didn't even know what masonry was, to be honest with you. But in the end, after 3 years, not only did I take to it, I got probably the greatest award of my life, and it was the key to the school. An award they only give if there is a student that exemplifies what they say is the founder's original ideals of what he was trying to produce. And they don't give the award every year. They give it only if there's a consensus of the faculty. They write the same name down. So I had a landslide victory. It was like, I got this key award. So I really took to masonry. It might have been the little bit of Italian nerve blood in me, and all of a sudden it gelled. But I really enjoyed it. And so when I graduated, even when I was still in school, and I graduated 41 years ago. I got dark hair. My brother's bald and gray hair, but somehow I held on to my dark hair. But 41 years, even my junior year, I was doing contracting, going out and soliciting to people who wanted. I had a truck and a trowel, will travel, fix your concrete or sidewalk or whatever it is. So when I got out of school, I began to work for a few different contractors as their resident mason. I would, build foundations, fireplaces, whatever it was they needed. And after a few years of doing that, I kind of found out, because I wasn't in construction before, how volatile a environment it is in construction. And a lot of companies, they don't have benefits, and they kind of, you got to get this feeling like your employer's sort of looking at you like a piece of depreciable equipment. Like when your back goes, we're throwing you out with the scrap pile, And also was, the whole thing was about speed. And I didn't like that we had to hurry, because at trade school, you know, my teacher was there for 30-some years, and his teacher was there for 30. They were graduates of the school. So we were learning in school how to do, like, you know, elliptical arches and Gothic arches and fancy stuff, you know. So when you get out, said, no, we're building a Kmart, you know, like, just hurry up, you know. So I'm, as you can say, a wordy person and thinker. And I thought, I didn't go to school this long to get just, my head handed to me and abused like that. And I thought, I want to do more, you know, and I think I could run a better business, even though I tell everyone, I didn't go to Wharton School of Business, I went to Williamson Trade School. So I thought, I'll just follow the golden rule, treat other people the way you want to be treated, and then, you know, hopefully it'll work. Well, now, 38 years of running that business, I still run a masonry restoration business. I have like 20-some people working for me, and I will get into why Lime works. I started a second company 21 years ago called Lime Works US, and been serving the industry ever since I got out of school. So that's kind of like a nutshell of my story. But shortly into business, someone asked us to, I live in Bucks County, so littered with, like here, stone farmhouses, barns, mills, everything, you know. Someone asked us to repoint an old farmhouse. So I went in and did it, and I said, you know, I really like this kind of slower work that can be more thoughtful. You know, it's not like slinging blocks and bricks around. I'd like to make this a specialty niche. And I didn't know that historic preservation was going to be a thing. I just thought, I like this kind of work. So I ended up in '86 taking a class in Williamsburg, Virginia, that was an extension intensive workshop called Restore, all capital letters. They have the program in New York City, and they run an intensive workshop in Williamsburg. So the professor from Columbia is the one who opened my eyes to material science. Like, I didn't think anything of it, because when you go to trade school, they say, this is a string line, this is a trowel, this is mortar, here's bricks, you know, lay them to the line, you know, that kind of thing. You don't really ask, like, well, you find out what's in mortar, but you assume somebody else knows, and they tell you what to use, and that's what you use. So here, what this story is going to be a lot about is that, interestingly, in hindsight, we have recorded 6,000 years of building history, and we know what has lasted because of, you know, everyone thinks like, oh, people from the 1800s, boy, they really were great builders. And I always say, no, they weren't. The ones that were built correctly are still standing. The ones that weren't built so good, they're gone. They fell over. So to look at what material scientists do, they look at what still stands and what is working and say, you know, there's a curious thing. How come we have the aqueducts that the Romans built, or the Pantheon dome, Pantheon building, and the dome 143 feet across, all lime concrete, before they had cement concrete, you know. And how is it that's working? And then, you know, maybe that would be a good thing if we build like that again, let's just say. So he had me really interested. And what really drew me in the most was when he started talking about 6,000 years of lime and sand being mortar and no cement. Now, at trade school, when we did projects in the shop, we'd build them out of hydrated lime and sand, and then we'd tear them down, and we would use the material again and again and again, just add water again. But to think you'd take cement away, you know, seemed like I could hardly believe it. However, he started talking about all these wonderful properties of all the castles that we ooh and ah, and I guess I will show you some pictures that in a minute. When we look at the iconic buildings that are still standing worldwide that are 300 and 400 and 500 years old, and no one's touching them, they're just in great state of repair. He was saying, oh, it's because of all these wonderful properties about lime. One is that if there's slight movements in the earth, lime has a hexagonal plate crystal structure, and if the bell tower in Italy is moving a little bit, the lime slides between. When we make cement, concrete, if it moves, it cracks. And that's why in sidewalks, you have to tell it every 3 feet, well, when you're gonna crack here, crack here, crack here, because it's very brittle. So we've accommodated how we build by saying, all right, cement's quick setting and very strong, and there's places in the world for it, but we have to accommodate the fact it's brittle. So lime had this wonderful malleability. Okay, nice. Then said another thing is, if you ever all live in me, you might be here because you have an old structure, and even this one here. Do you go through this? Can you go to the next slide, or do I use this thing? Okay. All right. So, all right. I saw this picture. Well, see the background rendering. Recall, instead of calling it stucco over stone, everyone calls these buildings that have an external lime render shelter coat. That's what it is. It's a sheltering coat. And they call it, hey, look at that stucco over stone farmhouse, stucco over stone barn, stucco over stone something. That's a more modern term. The right term is an external lime render. It's been rendered with lime and for a purpose. Well, when you get back behind, you get into the stonework, you'll find that, oh my gosh, not only did they use poor man's building material and they cleared a farmer's field to lay up rubble, which sounds like a pile of junk, rubble. It is, it's a pile of junk. They laid up stone, stone, with clay and sand they get from the creek. And there's so punky, there's no cement in there, or hardly lime ever, only if they had. Lime was a commodity, because you had to have a lime kiln to cook the lime and all that. So if you're gonna settle a farmstead, you're gonna use what you got, and what you got is, gotta clear the farmer field, get the building stone. Now we're gonna stack it all up. What we're gonna use as a cushion between the units is to take clay and sand and lay it up with that to keep it together. And the width, the 2 foot thick walls and the interlaced, cornerstones, it's the integrity of that makes the structure really stand. It's not anything to do with the strength of the mortar in between. There's no strength to the mortar really in between. So in the end, when you shelter coat these old buildings, the purpose really is that today in our society, we kind of romanticize the idea of exposing stone farmhouses and barns and mills because we like to see all the mosaic of all the pieces fit together, the big, oh my gosh, look at the size of that big cornerstone, that kind of thing. They didn't think that in that day. And really, they didn't think that from when they built them for like 500 years before that. They romanticized the idea that has been true from the beginning of time till now. Really good stonework, the best ever. You can't get a credit card between the stones. You think of all these shows they have on Discovery of the Mayans and everything else. That's how tight the joints were. There was no, when you use rubble, you have so much surface area exposed to the weather that you need to, it's best, they knew, to shelter coat it with the external lime render, because what they did romanticize was making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. They're going to take this junk, stone, lay it up, and then with the undulating walls that they are, square it up nice and straight with the brown coat of a scratch brown and finish coat and whitewash it. And if ever you see, as if you have stone farmhouse, anybody has farmhouse, you look under the porches still, sometimes you see pinged into the plaster what looks like lines that look like blocks. And they think, why they draw concrete blocks into plaster and whitewash it? They weren't. They were romanticizing, we use cut blocks of stone. That's good stonework. So they were doing a trompe l'oeil to fool the eye, and what they romanticized was making a silk purse out of a sow's ear and doing something that takes a crude structure built with poor man's building material and make it formal. And not, and then they'd say, now when it's not formal, we're going to ping lines in it and make it look, very stately. And so that is why they did that. Interestingly, I'm driving along, my poor family when we go on vacations, the kids, none of them went into masonry. You can tell why, because every time we go on vacation, I'm like, so down here at the Forks Church, the next road, two down with the light, I saw a nice, no one touched it, external lime render with the bubbly, the pebbly finish on the outside. Okay, you saw that. If you go down, you'll see at the light. Hang on left, and there's a house right there in the corner. And that's original. It's got that bumpy, some call it pebble dash, and then whitewashed. And really, it's not pebble dash. It's actually called a harling. And the Scottish would call it harling because the scoop trowel, which we sell at Limeworks, scoop trowels, you scoop up the stuff with the pea gravel and you hurl it at the wall. And then you whitewash it. And why they do that is it increases surface area. Well, it's like the popcorn ceilings in new construction. It takes the undulations and things and makes it all like evened out, but it also increases surface area because by doing that, making bumps and everything, it accelerates the speed of drying. So it dries a lot quicker. When it gets nor'easters hit it, it disperses moisture across all that lime, external lime render, right back out to the atmosphere. It never penetrates into your punky clay and sand bedding mortar. So the Scottish call it the rough cast. I mean the harling, and the English call it rough cast. So if you ever see those pebbly, pebble dashy kind of thing with whitewash on it, that was original one style. And then you can also have smooth with the lines pinged in it. It's all lined out. That's called lining out. Anyway, the professor at Columbia, who was at Williamsburg, was telling us about 6,000 years of building history and all these wonderful things, and saying, it's malleable, it breathes, so that, like a piece of coral, has little holes in it. When nor'easters blow against and throw it a rain, it dries out so quickly because it doesn't penetrate, because it just gets in so much to the skin, but like interconnected pores, it like a bounty paper towel would just disperse it across its whole surface of the paper towel. It just goes across surface area and it goes right back to the atmosphere. And it was a shelter coat and a waterproofing kind of a material, lime. Even though it's waterproofing, but it's got pores to it. You think it's counterintuitive. It's the opposite. So he said, okay, it breathes. Okay, wonderful, it breathes. Secondly, in the theme of breathing, we find that how we build today, modern structures, everything's so airtight, you really can't live in a sealed up bag, It was more conducive to health to have interior lime plaster, external lime render, punky stone walls. They're all together. There's even hospitals in Germany where they're going back to building everything clay and lime and sand and everything, so it's conducive to health. So, as I just told somebody yesterday, I'm meeting them tomorrow, is that, when you wash dishes, you put the gloves on and you wash them. An hour later, you take them off, your hands are all kind of like white and bubbly. Because in it, it's imperceptible. Your body is trying to breathe. And the same thing, if you put latex paint instead of whitewash on the old building, or you use some cement stucco that doesn't have a vapor permeability, you lock it all up, what will happen? Rising damp from water in the ground, it will say, well, you went against one of the two ancient rules that my teacher at Williamson taught me, which I still remember to this day, and it's going to sound so silly, but it's so true. Don't forget, water runs downhill. Okay, we won't. The other one, don't forget, you can't fight water and win. If you try to fight water, water will dig the Grand Canyon. It always will win, find its way. And right now, just as a side, we know there's $1 billion problem in Pennsylvania alone by these elastomeric stuccos. Oh, the elastomeric stucco people won't say it's their problem. They'll say it's flashing and kickouts and problems, and you dumb masons didn't know how to do this right. But inherently, plastic stucco will force the moisture that from living and cooking and living inside to why they're rotting all the windows and the OSB and the boards. It's contributing to the bad flashings and everything. But the big companies have a lot of good lawyers who make it, the other guy's fault. But inherently, you went against, it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. You have 6,000 years of building history of using breathable coatings that are malleable, breathable, okay? Other doesn't react with salts. So you see a lighthouse on the ocean, and it's whitewashed and built with lime putty, and freezing cold, salty Atlantic Ocean's crashing on it. If you build the same thing out of concrete, cement, the ocean will eat it in 30 years. Cement, salt, and cements don't get along. Lime is immune to sulfate, doesn't care. there's actually mixes that we have from Europe that are as old as the hills. This is, please, I'm glad everyone sees these, especially if there's a mason in the room. The companies in Europe, because they're older than we are, they got older buildings and everything else, they tell us mix seawater with the mix. Don't, to add salt to mortar, it's like, no, except maybe a little calcium chloride that people add in the winter to help accelerate the set of it. But it's not a common thing to add salt into mixes. But they have reasons why that, and I could explain, but there are reasons why that improves the durability of the lime mortars and stuff to add seawater, okay? And really they did it in the United States too, because like the dry Tortugas, all those forts where they use natural cements, they had seawater. They didn't have any fresh water. So it's not like it's just in Europe, because people came from Europe and they built like that here. We just only know from the window of my experience. Here I am, Johnny, come lately, coming into trade school in 1982, which seems like yesterday, 40, or 79 I went in. I'm just going to use whatever they tell me to use. I don't know the difference, cement or whatever. But now in hindsight, it's 2020, we can see that so many well-meaning repair to church bell towers and farmhouses, and next thing you know, you sealed up the whole thing with external lime stucco cement, type NS, strong, dry lock. Next thing you know, the moisture is rising damp coming up into that punky sand and clay, and says, well, you thought you'd fight me and win, and I can't get out to the atmosphere through this rock-hard cement, so I'm going to go in there and bubble up your plasters, ruin all the wallpaper and everything. So everyone's got that problem, the moisture starts to move inward, especially in the wintertime when it's warm inside, the moisture will move in. So there is a dynamic that we should, if we're after the 100-year fix, things that we do, which we're trying to fix things how they lasted for all time in the past. I'm a tradesperson. I would say that anybody who is a tradesperson, if we all want to go in to make a living and make money and make good money. But as time goes on, and you're a lifer, like I've been doing 30 years, you start to like to drive down the road and say, I built that, I did that one, I fixed that one. I don't know what it is. It takes you to another level. It's not even about money anymore. And the thing is when you think that your work, I did that one, and it's going to fall down in 10 years because I used bad material. That's what motivated me to go to Williamsburg. But then this is where this whole story is going. He talked about breathability. He talked about malleability. He talked about immune to sulfate attack. But then he said, and lime has this wonderful property of autogenous healing. You know how like a starfish breaks its leg off, and it just grows another one? Well, lime mortar, when the bell tower moves and a fissure were to open up, lime heals itself and it repairs itself while we wait. It just fixes itself. And I'm like, come again. Wait, I'm on the front row. Can you please, how does that work? Because I never heard of such a thing, that these ancient buildings, no one's fixing them because they're fixing themselves. I'm like, well, I want to know more about that. Well, I've told this story many times to many people. And it took me, what you're going to learn in like 5 minutes, it took me 15 years to where I would, when I asked the professors and people, can you explain that? Their muddy answer, I could tell, they don't really got their head wrapped around how that does work, because I don't understand what you just said. And so I'd go to symposiums all over the country. I became a pest at University of Pennsylvania, Columbia, everywhere. They symposium, all these students there for their college degree, and I'm in the front row asking the dumb questions and holding you to it till you answer it. And they would say questions at the end, and then they dart left out there, chase them down the road. Okay, finally, 15 years ago, I got to 21 years ago, I got to Scottish Lime Center in Fife, Scotland. They are an organization, a non-profit. If you're ever interested, scottlime.org. I'm best buds with them. Okay, Scott Lime, they are a non-profit charged by their government to disseminate knowledge. Don't be an expensive consultant to keep smoke and mirrors and keep the consulting number, bill going or whatever. free. Because why? Because we have endless walls, dry laid walls, stone walls. We got mortared walls. We got endless castles. But the purpose is that if we are inadvertently introducing inappropriate materials that are slowly actually adding to and accelerating the demise of the cultural heritage of what we are doing ourselves a disservice to our kids. So Scottish Lime Center unearthed this mystery material, lime. And once you figure it out, tell everybody, even Andy if he shows up. And I did. I showed up in the front row. And I was like, hey, can you explain how buildings are fixing themselves? Because I want to know about that. Because I'm all ears. And they did explain to me how lime will, and I'll just tell you quickly because it only takes a minute, but if you know what the answer is, it takes a minute. When you cook the lime in a lime kiln, because if you ever heard of, like down my way, Philadelphia, we have a lime kiln pike. I'm sure you got lime roads on this thing around here. Cleverly name the road what you do on that road, Butcher Road, Butcher Street, Okay, so you got lime kiln pike. They would take limestone, Lancaster, all the limestone around here, cook the limestone, and then you would have to transport it, by ox cart, whatever, to the job site. That's why it was a commodity. You had to pay money for that as opposed to clearing your own field and doing everything with your own material. All right. When they cooked it, the fact that there is a time-honored, like anything, there was a trade, which we got rid of conveniently, like all the trades are going away, I don't know if you noticed that. But there's one they got rid of way back called the kilnsman. We don't need you anymore. Go sign up, Okay, the kilnsman, what did he do? He cooked the limestone so it remained reactive. And even to this day, I grew up in Plymouth Meeting, I mentioned, there was the Miracle Lime, how am I forgetting this? Corson's from 1860 to 1996, the oldest lime producer in the United States. The name of the road they're on is Chemical Road. And the name of the game in all lime worldwide is to keep it reactive so it converts back to a limestone once you cook it. Anyway, if you don't follow, it's like taking grandmom's recipe for baking a cake. And she says, preheat the oven to 350 and bake for 1 hour. Now some harebrain says, well, how about we turn it up to 700? We'll crank them out every 20 minutes. Hey, there he is. How many years were you at Williamson?
18 years.
Okay, so Dan Hittebeutel's here. He's a Honeybrook. I wondered if you'd show up to harass me.
I would have been here on time, Andy, but I was at a seminar at Chester County Library about the cannons they found in Warwick.
Oh.
I was interested in that. Sorry I'm late. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, you're getting demerits now because he knows about the school we went to. It was run like a military academy. I had to wear a suit and tie to every class, every meal. Had to wear white uniforms to lay bricks. 9.5-hour school day. And Dan taught at Coatesville, right, as an instructor in the.
Coatesville Tech for 20 years.
And then he was instructor at Williamson. And anyhow, I already did the Williamson talk, but anyway, we're talking about lime and the Scottish Lime Center and the kilnsman. And, you can't take grandma's recipe. It's not nice to mess with grandma's recipe, and say, I'm going to change it. Say you turn the oven up to 750 where it's supposed to be 350 to bake a cake for an hour. And you cook it for, 20 minutes, you're going to make a cake. Oh, it's a rock when you're coming out. You ruined it. Same deal. When you go to cook limestone, if you don't cook it for the proper amount of time, the proper temperature, you will take what should remain reactive and convert back to a stone. You can actually dead burn it so that when you finally slake the material, that is reintroducing carbon dioxide via the vehicle of water that brings it into the stone, when you do that to reactivate it back so it can convert to a stone again, if it's cooked too hot, it's dead burned. And if the lime could talk, you say, come on, do that magic trick where you convert yourself back into a limestone again. If they could talk, it'd say, you cooked the life out of me, I'm an inert powder. I'm not going to do anything for you. And really, the reason I use limes now, which I'll explain, which I import from Europe, is like the 180-year-old company I import the material from. It's from France, and I found that the temperament of Europeans was one where I think they more highly prize cultural heritage than I sensed that, there's a lot of lip service about things, and there's people who are genuine about it, but I'm just saying that to the French, everything cooking is religious, you know what I mean? I don't care if it's a souffle or if it's a stone. And then to say, oh, but monsieur, we must, to your cultural heritage, we must do it right. It's tradition. We've always done it this way. So they haven't. So the Scottish Lime Center, when they convinced me that when you cook the stone properly, and a certain percentage of the stone, or even around here, the kilnsman would have known it, if it's cooked just right, a certain percentage of that stone would remain what would be called free lime or available lime, and that would not be fully cooked. So when the bell tower moves, and when a fissure opens up, and when nor'easters blow in, it brings into solution the free lime, which comes to the surface in crystalline bridges and closes the fissure. And it's like, oh my gosh, wow. Thank you, Scottish Lime Center. I'm in. Where do I get the good gold medal? I got to get back to Bucks County. I'm wasting time. I'm a mason. I fix these buildings. Where do I get the good gold medal? I don't want to reinvent this stuff. I just want, where's the best? They pointed me to St. Estier. That's why I sell this. So I had to call home. Believe me, I'm a frugal mason. I don't want to buy lime from France. I had to call my dear wife, who I met when I was 16. She you know how it is when you're in school. She went to Millersville. Sorry. Hey, I'll tell you, if I seem a little choked up, I'd be choked up anyway. But I had open heart surgery 8 weeks ago. And ever since then, they say, don't be surprised. Sometimes you'll get a little melancholy and choked up. So everything's, I'm like tearing up over here. Lime that heals itself. Okay. So anyway, my wife, I had to call home and say, can I buy a ship container? Because the only way to buy it, unless you're getting a bag. Can I buy a ship container of lime from France? And she, as she does to this day, if you think so, go ahead. So I got a ship container, and I started using it, and it took me 2 years to use all the material in that ship container. And we were making mortars, plasters, and paints. Well, remember, I was sort of a pest at University of University of Pennsylvania and other laboratories. I'd just show up and be at their seminars. So they knew me, and they said, that stuff you're bringing in, we're very curious about this. Could you give us samples? Don't even tell us, probably because I talk too much, don't tell us what it does. We'll figure this out. And they came back to me and said, my gosh, this lime mirrors the properties, the chemical properties of the binder that sort of holds the sand together for the majority of everything built in our country before 1900. This is great stuff. And I was like, well, great, that's what the Scottish Lime Center told me. That's why I'm using it. So the next thing you know, when I said I've been a mason for 38 years, graduating from Williamson, I was not going to light the world on fire. I was not going to be the lime loony guy that sells lime to the world or anything. But I started getting requests from other masons and from architectural conservators and people saying, would you sell us some? So I started selling some. And next thing you know, about 18, 20 years ago, I started Limeworks US. And now we bring in about 2 ship containers a month. It's got bigger than life. It took me 2 years to use 1 ship container. Now we're making mortars, plasters, paint. We supplied all the mortar to restore St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, the University of Virginia's Rotunda Dome, the plaster, the mortar, the Alamo, down the islands to the Parliament building. I have in our laboratory a guy that runs, that has his master's in preservation from Penn and a chemist. They do microscopy mortar analyses. It's got bigger than life. I don't even know, I got to pinch myself. I can't even believe it. I went to learn to lay bricks. And now I'm like, so what happened? I'm 61, as I mentioned. And I said to myself, like, well, when you're 65, are you supposed to retire? I'm like, I don't golf. I don't even know what I'm going to do. This is all I've done in my whole life. So I realized I was serving the industry in such a big way. I bought an industrial farmstead, and I've been adaptively restoring the stone mill that ran on a water wheel for 150 years, the 9-bedroom brick Victorian home, the monster 95-foot-long hay barn, And we teach classes to people who come, which you're all welcome. If you want to sign up, you'll see that on our website on the Craftwork Training Center. We run classes on how to plaster and point and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so here's why I'm starting with some of that story is that I think in perspective, you need to know that lime is an ancient material. It's not saying newfangled, hey, we got something new and improved. Matter of fact, I was paid an honorarium to go to Penn and talk to the architectural conservation students. And in the end, the moral of my story was that worked, and that worked, look at all these castles and buildings all around the world. Let's do that again. And everyone would be like, that's profound. And I'll be like, isn't that common sense? Like, just use what used to work, So that's the story of how the lime was used traditionally as shelter coats on mass stone, mass brick and stones, poor quality brick were also shelter coated. But how it's used, but that it makes a difference if you mess with a time-honored tradition of how to cook a stone, you will dead burn it. And what I found was, because I had tried this before going to the Scottish Lime Center, I'd go to Home Depot, well, it wasn't a Home Depot, there used to be masonry supply yards everywhere. I'd go to the masonry supply yard, because they're all kind of like closing, and I'd get type S hydrate lime, and I'd add sand and water. And if it's sheltered under a porch or something, or inside, you can do it. But if it's out in the weather and exposed to freeze-thaw cycles, it's going to fall apart in a year or so, and I don't know why. And the reason is because when Portland cement, which is the modern binder, like I said, Penn said, hey, the binder you have mirrors the binder of before 1900. Well, the binder that has become king now is called Portland cement. And we have that in concrete and mortars. And what Portland cement is cooked limestone. It's limestone again. The thing is up here in the Lehigh Valley, David O. Saylor, if you ever heard any of your historians, in Copley, started cooking limestone in a vertical kiln, okay? And the difference is, it was discovered in Europe, Portland cement invented by Joseph Atzman, 1824. Found out you throw chalk and clay in there, and you go past the melt phase. So forget grandma's recipe. You're supposed to cook the lime, 1650 to 1850. If you go up, as we know, when you get to 2200 degrees, that's how we make glass. We melt sand. It comes liquefied. So somebody said, turn up and melt the limestone. So Portland cement is just liquefied limestone that forms something called clinker, a big new rock glob, of which then you grind it down to a fine powder, and when you add that to sand, it becomes super hard, strong, hydraulic, sets with water, but becomes very dense. And before Dan was at Williamson, Stacy Cartledge was my instructor, to show you how dense it was, Portland cement. He went up to a student and held a number 200 sieve, has 10,000 holes in 1 square inch. You can't believe you can make that many holes. You can't see through it. But he put Portland cement powder in there, and he shook it, and it came out like 10x sugar in the sieve. He went through that. Then he cleaned it out, put it over a kid's head with a pitcher of water. Excitement is building. He then fills the sieve up, and not a droplet comes through. So, therefore, that explains that when you stucco a building or dry lock, whatever, and you put impervious stuff, because the water can't get through there, you can make a mix that will not allow the water to get through. So it's not breathing. So that shows that that's what cement does. But what happens is there's a metamorphosis in the kiln. You started with limestone. They're both limestone. But a property that never existed with lime is the presence of tricalcium aluminates. And that's what reacts with salt. So we all know if you throw rock salt on your concrete to help melt the ice and everything, it makes it pockmarks. It eats up your concrete. That's what I mean about the ocean will eat a concrete built, unless it's, they have sulfate resisting cement. Everyone's trying to figure out how to continue to work with cements when, see ya. We just work with what used to work forever, They keep on trying to come up with another version of how to do a cement, because in engineering school, especially right now, another problem, billion-dollar problem with the elastomeric stuccos over McMansion type of building, new homes, and they have that take off. Maybe you've heard of it, where they take it all off, take all the OSB off, take everything off, monster problem. In the same way, we got 6,000 bridges in Pennsylvania. They're slated for repair. They're stone arch bridges. Hey, township, you'll spend $6,000 to $8,000 engineering study. See if that we can, oh no, we got to make it two lane, wider lanes. We got to do this. It's always going to be the same answer. It's obsolete. Get rid of it. They're not going to fix a stone arch bridge. I mean, they sometimes will, but what they do is just cutting the stones in half and redecorating a steel and concrete bridge. The reason is because if you go to engineering school, this whole thing about building with clay and sand and what is the distribution of weight via how the arch throws weight around, no, we're not doing that. We're using steel. We have measurements and numbers. We can just, and you know what? You get a 50-year service life, and then we do it again. And that's just how things are done today. But unfortunately, you know how the beautification of our scenery, where we have beautiful stone arch bridges still standing 200 years later, it takes away from the cultural heritage of what we had in our, our landscape and everything. So, I'm somewhat of an advocate, but I still understand, and I sympathize with PennDOT too, because, my gosh, all the roads in Pennsylvania, they got to maintain these bridges, because so many times I get called with, people who say, oh, you're going to be our savior, and they'll bring me in to see their huge Liechtenstein report from, why the bridge has got to go away, and how Mr. Mason Man's going to try to help them to show that this can be saved. And usually in a kind of like, it's condescending, kind of like, they'll hear me out, but have no, where's the math that you can show us that this thing, which is of antiquity, is going to remain? But yet we know worldwide how these old bridges that are built with simple materials, and but rely on dynamics of distributing weight and everything, how they will work, that they will continue to serve for quite a long time if properly attended to. One time, side story is that a group from Saco, Maine asked me to come look at the bridge, because I did save a bridge in Bucks County as a volunteer effort with a bunch of people. And they called the group in Boulder, Colorado, who ran the conservation effort in Bucks County. And so Saco, Maine said, you got to come and save it. The bureaucrats are going to tear down our bridge. So I told them, look, they're just going to put their arm around me and say, patronizingly, thanks for coming, thanks for coming. I said, but little do you know that I have a very good friend in Edinburgh, Scotland, John Addison from Mott MacDonald. He's the head of Ancient Structures Division, and he's a good friend. And I called him, and he was consulting for National Park Service in Montana. John, can I please push your ticket? Because they always go out of Newark International back to Scotland. Push your ticket a week. We're going to go to Maine. He's like, sure, I'd love a road trip. So we get there, and all the angry mob people with their flaming torches and the bureaucrat people was like, we got to tear it down. All the bridge builders who were behind them like, tear it down. We're going to fix it. Here, I introduced, this is John, head of Ancient Structures Division of McDonald. Their jaws dropped, right? He studies the bridge for about 20 minutes and says, this can be saved, and I can prove it in the maths, and it'll be about $10,000 augmentation study. And of course, the townspeople were like, you already spent $80,000 of our money, tax money, figuring out how it's got to go away. Beautiful stone arch bridge, You're paying the extra $10,000 to see what he's got to say. Bridge is still there to this day. And I'll tell you, when you go to Maine and you do something like that, I had never had lobster bisque at a party they threw. It was like, I come back with my little bowl of soup, and theirs is like mounded with lobster. They're like, Andy, we're greedy about lobster. Go get more. It'll load it up, So, and that's what I'm talking about. The pay of earning money is one thing, but to have that kind of, I don't know, something about that that you can't put a price tag on. And that motivates tradespeople to say, I want to say I did that. And if you can say, I did that, but I used, you know, galvanized steel, and I know eventually that'll rust, so I could have used stainless, darn it. People who are in the trades will like to procure the best performing materials because when they see the work of the Romans, they're like, you know what, I already make money and everything. Now I want my stuff to be here. Like, you know, one day they'll make a statue of me or something, you know, because he built that, you know. Like the town where Limeworks is Telford, PA. I live in Quakertown. And it's interesting, it's like Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe was never there, you know. They took Mock Chunk and turned it into Jim Thorpe, thinking they'd bring some tourists in, right? Telford, Thomas Telford, a famous bridge builder, was never there, but he was a famous name. That's why Limeworks is in Telford, PA, and Telford got its name from Thomas Telford, a Scottish engineer. Anyhow, sorry. Oh, is this interesting, or is this, am I going off? Okay. No, you got past slide one. Hey, by the way, how long am I supposed to do this for? Is this a 1 hour talk or 4 hours?
An hour, a little more.
Oh, an hour, a little more. Okay, well, we're getting into. All right, so we got the history, and there is a purpose, there is a proper way to do things, and if you do, you'll get what we're shooting for: long service life. That means we're trying to do stuff that lasts for the ages. And now, who all here owns an old building, old farmhouse, barn, structure? You have old buildings, okay? So one rule is less is more. You know, a lot of times I love to go in cold cracking wherever that they had no money to fix anything. Everything's in virgin state because they're broke. And you see things in a better state of conservation than when you go and somebody, you know, the two rules are, you know what will ruin historic structures is water and time. Given enough water, enough time is going to make it go away. The other is ego and affluence. You get to where people have money, and then they can impose that upon a building and say, not under my watch, I'm using type N cement because I ain't know better than you do. You know, this is what ruins buildings, you know. So less is more means, you know, when you see materials that are working, like an old stone farmhouse, say you have a farmhouse, and you look at the lime mortar, and it's got little cracks in it, and but it's intact for the most part, leave well enough alone. You don't have to repoint that. And I really get people confused when they call me out for consulting because they're like, are you trying to sell us masonry or not? I was like, no, it's perfect the way it is, you know. Like, but I agree. But you know what? It's the posterity of wanting to give the right answer for the conservation of our cultural heritage, which are these little vernacular places all dotting over Chester County and everything. We want to save them the way they are. So less is more. Let's remember that. Now, still good for an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's still a good thing, too. So there is careful repairs that you can do in certain places. And sometimes wholesale renewal. And it's not at wholesale prices either. You gotta do the whole thing over. So church calls me, got a bell tower. This happened recently. I can tell you I'm turning it into a dinosaur because in '96 I gave a church a price to repoint their bell tower with the wonderful lime mortar. Try to explain it all, and they're all glassy-eyed looking at me like, okay, when are you going to go away? And they didn't give me the job. And it was $105,000 I think I get to repoint the bell tower. They went with a guy who was like $100,000. And the guy used see, in the lime I'm bringing from France, like, ooh la la, it must be expensive. Who cares? Because you know what? Labor and scaffold is what it costs. That's the big expense. The difference of the guy doing it for $100,000 or me or $105, if you're going to get a 100-year service life, amortize that out, use a better deal to use a better performing material. Well, I'm not gloating, but the church, we just repointed the bell tower fully, again, a year ago, and they didn't even remember, the whole church building committee is a new group, so they don't even remember me from '96, but I had all my records and everything. And they had me out and said, look, the parapet and all these mortar everywhere. I said, yeah, because cement's brittle. That bell tower moves, fissures open a crack, and cement does not heal itself. It just falls out, you know. And it's all sopping wet up there. because of not releasing water. Because if you get cracks in cement pointing, and it drives it into that punky bedding mortar, it can't get its way out. It starts to get a darker color and swell what was once sound masonry. Because of freeze thaw, when things freeze, like the old ice trays, and water's in there and they freeze, it expands. Once sound masonry starts to expand, and that's where the mortar starts falling out and stuff. So I said, I gave them the whole spiel again, this time they're all ears. And we did it. We did the job, and we're very proud of it. And I'm not gloating over it, because I really would rather anybody and everybody to just listen to the simple mason guy says, excuse me, I have a little idea, but usually it's the suit and tie guy with 15 degrees. He's got to know. This guy can't know, And I don't fight anybody. If anybody who has ears to hear what I got to say, if they want me to do it, we do it our way. If they don't want to hear about it, say thank you very much, and I go the other way. But I want to tell you that less is more. If you're going to repair it, you got to repair things in kind, like to like. So you don't want to go taking a modern cement that's not compatible with the bedding mortar, doesn't move, doesn't breathe, reacts with sulfates, and we're not at the ocean, but all walls have salts in them, all of them. These old punky walls have salts in them because sulfates are formed by weak carbonic acid from rainwater. Rainwater forms these weak carbonic acids and sulfates. So they're stuck in the walls anyway. So everywhere you go, and believe me, I don't know if you're all from the area, I travel all over creation. And down at Villanova, they have all these beautiful new stone dormitories. And just a headache of thinking of all that sulfate leaching out, like has calcite and efflorescence salts coming out of everything. And you know what? It's us trying to think we're going to fool ourselves to a better fix when you could have just gone back to, it's like Dorothy, you could have just clicked your heels, you would have been back there right away. You didn't have to go to Oz, But here what's happening is some Portland Cement, the name Portland Cement, ASTM says this is what's Portland Cement. They've taken that and cheapened it by gauging in fly ash and other things, which also give the strength, but also create salts, which also make it cheaper. It also makes this other problem come out. And part of me has to be cynical and say, yeah, I think the whole thing's about keep the patient sick and keep the consulting going. Let's sue the contract, whatever. Thank you very much. You guys go that way. The chemistry of the material I'm importing has not changed since Roman times. Oh, by the way, when I was at Scottish Lime Center, would you like to see the Roman ruins all around while we're here? Yes, I do. We go around. Monster tower, 60 foot around, 300 feet high. Solid brick walls. Imagine that. 60 feet around. There was a goddess in there one time. She's gone. Trees growing out of it. Monster thing. But it's still there. It's 2,000 years later. Extract that mortar. The chemistry of that material is it's not like what the Romans use and what I'm bringing in. In all of the territories they occupied, they were engineers that knew how to doctor up lime if it needed it. So, very popular was, at the foot of Vesuvius, was a town of Pazzuli. And the ash is today still called pozzolan from Pazzuli. And they would add that ash to doctor up lime to increase and make better strength for purposes. But when they were in the Aquitaine region where I get my lime, they're like, don't have to do anything to it. It's naturally occurring NHL, naturally occurring hydraulic lime. And it has the reactive silica caught up in the stone, cook them together, you get this wonderful thing. So all the ruins in that area are the exact same stone as lime as what I have. All they did was cook it, flake it, and add sand and mixing water to it. And that's why the Scottish Lime Center said, hey, that's predictable. It has predictable. And that's why we supplied St. Pat's and other places, is that even in Chester County, if you meet a guide, he says, hey, I'm doing everything authentic. I got lime from Lancaster County. I'm cooking it. I'm slaking it. I'm doing it 100% authentic. Would you, architect, like to use this on this iconic building? give me the numbers. What are you going to get? The strength and the modulus elasticity and all these numbers. I don't know. It's just how they did it originally. With this litigious society we live in, the fact that St. Estier has published numbers, you dial in this much sand or that much sand, you get this PSI, this modulus, this breathability, this vapor per. Then their engineers can hang their hat on. It's not my problem. I designed this based on those numbers. And the architect, I spec'd it based on what the engineer said. Okay, and now it can only become applicator error, if it's the contractor, unless it's the manufacturer. But the chemistry of that stone, which is like this particular St. Estier, it's like a wine company. It's like, how they have like estate wines that have been in the family forever? This company, St. Estier, is family owned. Like they've been quarriers since 1851. So anyway, but it doesn't matter. The chemistry of the stone it's predictable. It stays the same. So you always get the same outcome. Where today, you don't know if I got your line right here. Since I started doing this, there's a couple other LineWorks people. You start Googling it, they buy Google AdWords, they jump right in front of me. And you caveat emptor, because guess what? They're buying something, we know what people are buying, and it's not the same thing, and you're not going to get the same outcome. But yes, a lot of them are like the guy with the trench coat on Foggy Pier. Got your line right here. I got half the price, But you know what? They siphon off folks that are just homeowners. But the people who are working on iconic structures, like the University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson being the third president, also an architect, all our domes are all architect. He introduced this thing, he brought it here. That's a World Heritage Site. They're going to say, we're going to use Bob's line, to fix this. Bob, he's making it the old-fashioned way. No. What I mean? They have to know what they're going to do as conservators to have a rationale behind what they've ordered to use for things. Well, that's wonderful, the iconic stuff. I'm talking to people who own buildings. Well, let the trickle-down effect occur. I'm supplying all these iconic places, but so what? You can use it on your farmhouse too, and we sell it to homeowners all the time. So 21 years ago, once people started buying the lime from me, and now it's built up to 2 containers a month, and we make mortars, plasters, whitewash, all this stuff, right? We sell it. We're not really a respecter of persons. Like, we don't care if you're the Taj Mahal. Most unbelievable. I tell you the truth, unless there's a technical issue in the installation that they need a mason, I don't even know where half the time where the stuff's going. But when I talk to my architectural conservator who does the mortar analyses and the reports, I'm like, you better get our marketing person to tell the world about this. It's just unbelievable what buildings we're affecting. So what I'm getting at is, you have available to yourself, material. Now, the thing is even if you have material, the next piece of the puzzle is, well, who knows how to do that work? Well, we feel as masons, and I have crews that do this work, and I'm not trying to get your work. Matter of fact, if you ever had me come to your place around here, so I'm going to pay you a little I have a little zone map, and it might be like down here, I think it's like $400, something like that. It's a little initial site visit. Look at what you got, come up with it. Bring your favorite mason with you, because I'll tell you what, if he's skilled with a trowel, and he can do things, it's just shifting what's on his hawker, or what he's going to use. So, and then it might be a little bit of me injecting interpretation. Like this was, don't take the stucco off your stone. There's a purpose architecturally for that. Or if you're going to, and everybody decided they want to, or it's already been pointed, and we're going to repoint it, then do it this way, and then the profile of the joint. Like, why is it inverted V? Why does it come to a point like that? Why is it something else, I can interpret that stuff very well, because this is, trust me, I'm a geek. I don't, like I told you, when we go on a vacation with the kids, they know all about this, but my one son went to Drexel and works for Lockheed. I can't compete with what they pay, And then my other son is an engineer for something infrastructure, and my daughter's married to a guy who works at the Naval Research Lab. So they all got great jobs. So I'm happy and proud for them. But we have an issue that a lot of young people aren't going into trades. And so why we run the Craft Work Training Center and why we would teach anybody who shows up at our doorstep who says, I want to learn, we'll say, okay, we will do. We don't care if you're a homeowner. We don't care if you're a person wanting to get into the trade, or what do we get? Guy shows up from Hawaii with his helper. He has the job to restore the Queen's Palace before it was a state. And he comes to take the classes because we have know-how, and we can what it is. See, where people are like, oh, I'm scared of lime. Don't you have to wet it a lot? And isn't it hard to use? And isn't it this and isn't it that? We're going to make 0 to 60. We're going to show you how it is so easy. Make short work out of it. And now we get union companies in the city send their whole company up, 25 people, and we'll take them for a 3 or 4 day boot camp. You know, give me 10. No, we don't do that to them. No, we run them through all the steps. So just say if you were, past my time of talking, so if you had something that you would want me to look at, you can always hire me to come look. If you have a favorite mason, I prefer that. And yes, sir.
Small retaining wall, concrete wall. One of the parts.
Now, was it built with cement all the way through and through? Oh, it's concrete block. Okay, so you have this. Remember, I was saying that there is a concept that concrete goes with concrete. You fix in kind, like to like. So we're not opposed to, if somebody says, which mortar should I repoint my 1972, my building? And I'll say, when was it built? 1972. No, that would have been a 116. That would have been a cement mortar. So you should fix it with a cement mortar. But if you go back historically, then you use something different. Which mix? Well, okay, so here's the trick on yours. Here's how to solve your problem. If you mix a 116, that's a very traditional, okay. You could go on the, okay. But the thing is instead of metal wire lath, which galvanized lath, I don't care if it's galvanized, they just sprinkle, like just electrostatically throw little galvanization. It all rusts. I don't care where you're at. We sell fiberglass lath and non-rusting screws. If you encase that with this lath, okay, self-furring lath that builds this, and then don't use a 116. Then we can design the recipe. Now you'll have the beauty of the lime's malleability, but you won't translate all your cracks from your blocks or whatever coming through. They'll be in there and they won't come out. So there's a little bit of design thing going on. Well, you won't, yeah. But if you parge it without the lath, all your cracks will translate through again. So you wrap it with this lath. But if you're going to use metal lath, you're going to have rust stains coming through it because metal expands 7 times its size. You'll have it oxide jacking, and it'll not only rust and gloop black brown will come out, but it'll expand, and then you'll have cracks coming through. So we have fiberglass lath. So we try to outsmart a lot of little problems in building and how that at Lime works. So, and when the world goes all that away, we're like, have fun. If you want to listen to us, we got our solutions, and we think there's a rationale that makes sense behind what we'll suggest.
By the way, I'd like your mention of PennDOT.
Okay. They got a lot under, to handle. They got a lot to handle. Yeah, they got a lot to. So it's a lot of work, but the thing that I've got many who are the us and the them thing. You got the professionals of engineering. I'm not poo-pooing the higher education at all because I went to trade school. I'd like to say cherry pick the great stuff of what is in engineering and architecture and everything and bring it on down home into what you do every day. But there is this big rift of this, contractor guys will be like, look at a blueprint, say, who drew this? You can't even build that kind of thing. They like to just make fun of and of course the professionals like, pesky contractors, like, they're dirty, that kind of thing. And so there's this big rift. All right, well, I like to think even at Limeworks we're bridging the gap because we get interns and people from Penn to come work in our lab, and all kinds of people taking our classes that are educated and educated in higher education. And then we also get common laborers who are used to being kicked. And the first thing we do is send them to our lecture that Anthony, our lab guy with Masters in Penn, does. And first thing we do is something they never have done. We appeal to their mind, and we tell them about 6,000 years of building history and show them incredible, iconic things. So after they're done watching this thing for an hour, listening, they're like, I'm about to change the world. And then they want to get out, let's mix it up and do it, So we appeal to their mind first, which normally, like I said, when I get out of trade school, it's like, shut up and go to work, But we're trying to bridge that gap and try to make it, so people understand, why are we doing this? And make it, make sense. So, yeah, Dan.
I came in a little late. Did you explain the difference between a bag of lime that you buy at your Mason Supply and lime work?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my talk's a little erratic here, but when Portland cement was invented in 1824, hit the shores by David O. Saylor in Copley, PA in 1870, that was done in a vertical kiln and had properties much like our naturally occurring hydraulic lime until 1910. Okay. Then they did a horizontal, not a vertical kiln, but a horizontal kiln, and they changed the temperatures up and things like that and kept on manipulating this Portland cement stuff. And then what happened was, a lot of the good workers, we killed them in World War I. And then when World War II comes, anybody who's a good worker, okay, we're going to throw you at World War II. So when the smoke clears, it's 1945, and we're like, 1950, we're going to build the American dream, Levittown, okay? By that time, there was no barrels of Portland cement. Hey, while we weren't looking, we invented a bag. Now we got bags of lime, bags of cement, and 6 parts sand, and that's a mix, and we're going to lay blocks and build your American dream. So all kids and everybody in masonry from like 1950 to now thinks, lime alone with sand? That'll never work. Because we don't know in our window of experience anything but these mixes that have been dominating from World War II to now, which is a small window of time. And it's wreaked havoc on historic structures. And truthfully, just another fun side note, the embodied energy to produce a pound of Portland cement actually produces more than a pound of pollution in CO2, because not only do you have to go to the melt phase and liquefy the stone, you have to use electricity to grind that, where here, I often like to say it's like the Raiders of the Lost Ark. The guy comes out with a sword and does this fancy, crazy sword trick and everything, and Indiana Jones is like, I got to go, Lime just got you right to where you had to go. But what they did with cement is they melted it, then they ground it, and then they created this super high-strength stuff that had this wonderful way to build higher, faster, stronger, better. We're the Industrial Revolution. We're going to chart our destiny and build to the stars, okay? Then later on, we're finding out there's problems. Well, one of the biggest problems is outside of water, the number one commodity used per person worldwide is concrete. And in the heyday of China building a city about the size of Philadelphia every month, and that was happening for quite a while, in the early 90s, say. A yard of concrete, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, was being poured worldwide, would be for every single living person, a yard of, you could name a yard for yourself. So with that, imagine the cement that went in it and the greenhouse gases, the CO2 emission. So here, the limes we have you can supplant cement mixes, and there's an 80% less carbon footprint with it. So even in sustainability and in health and not changing chemistry of material where you're introducing cheapo stuff to get it to do what it does, but try to make it cheaper, like add fly ash or ground granulated blast furnace slag. All these things, we're fooling ourselves because we're making a crappy something else crappy that's going to open up a whole nother set of problems. So just keep in mind, less is more. Just, treat your building like a piece of object art, like it was a Van Gogh or something, a thing. And step back and be a conservative conservator. Say, do I really need to do anything? Let me think of it. Because, that sounds crazy coming from me. But one time I took a seminar in Canada, and the guy who's doing it, who's still my friend to this day, he was the head of English Heritage, which is a equal of our Park Service. And he had like 300 people in the room, all suit and ties, me in the front row, going to ask the dumb questions, which everyone likes. I ask the dumb questions because they were thinking that too. But they're not good. They're hiding behind their doctorate. They don't want to, don't look stupid. I don't mind. I'll stand in the front row. Hey, by the way, what's that all about? Okay. Well, anyway, and funny, the most intellectual people end up always befriending guys who do the trades or whatever, because they are not too proud to mix it up with them, because they realize they're going to get the juicy answers of what really happens when this stuff is used. Because empirical knowledge and book knowledge, yes, they should meet, but they don't anymore. The master builders are not, you go to university and then you never, like in Penn, you don't even touch a brick, and they're going to be an architectural conservator. And did you ever touch a brick or a stone? No, whatever, not very limited. So anyway, losing my train of thought here on that one, but yes.
Question. Say a building like in 1800s, I know Mason told us once that people used to put on some of the buildings afterwards just to keep them Do you see that a lot, or is it typically all rendered from
Yeah.
from the wood go when they actually?
Right. So the external line render, a lot of times, and someone wants to take off their pebble dash whitewash, it's called Harling or rough cast. They'll take it off and say, aha, look, there's an inverted V pointing mortar underneath there. It was originally pointed, and somebody came in afterwards and did this. Or somebody in the 20s and 30s said, you know what, to insulate your building from the great nor'easters and the north wind, let's render this, and it'd be insulation in it. Yeah? But the truth is that where I said really good stonework, you can't get a credit card between. When you have this surface area, these monster joints between rubble stone, that is something that is going to allow water to penetrate in. And even if they did not get to where they were able to render it, they would do the inverted V, and I'll tell you what the inverted V is. It's because everyone today strikes joints with cement, strikes them concave or whatever, saying, you know what, I am going to fight water, and I am going to win, and I'm going to seal up, no water could possibly get in there, not thinking about the brittleness and movement. But masons historically, for 1,000 years, didn't strike joints, they cut joints. So they'd cut at top and cut at the bottom. And the reason they did is because by cutting it, opens the pores of the lime so carbonation can occur and allow it to become all it can be as a lime mortar needs to carbonate. And it also gives it more material. You're not cutting away and like brushing back mortar joints so the face of the stone are out and the joints are, but this isn't from 1950 to here to now. This is not authentic, okay? But the only time you'd see pointed joints is if you see a porch and above it, there's not only cornerstones, but then diamond shapes and other free stonework that fits together nicely, they meant that to be seen. If the joint tolerance is uniform, they meant that to be seen. If it's rubble and it's monster-sized joints, now remember, think about how they did what they did with the time and how they had to live compared to what we got today, right? So you think that they built the barn first so we had a place to put the animals, and then we can live until we got around to or we built a log home till we could build the farmhouse, and we are going to get to render it eventually. So they would do everything, and why they put that pointing at mortar in there? Do we have to spend money for lime and make pointing? Yes, because you know why? That punky sand and clay bedding mortar, it will get friable and get wet and dry out and crumble and fall out. You see that in your houses probably now if you did. So they would not only seal that up with the pointing, but lime acts as a desiccant. And if moisture's in the core of that wall, when you slake the lime, it has a violent exothermic reaction because you pushed off all the carbon dioxide when you cooked it in the kiln. Well, it's a young buck now. When you take that cooled stone and you add water to it. People think, oh boy, that's thirsty stone. It's having a violent exothermic reaction right in front of it. It's not thirsty at all. It doesn't want the water. The water is only a delivery vehicle to get carbon dioxide back in there. And it will turn the slaking bath to boil. Well, the water will boil within 5 minutes. But if you go 50 years into the future, and if you could interview the lime, and you know I'm a little touched because I'm talking like lime can talk, but if lime can talk. And you said, how you feeling today? I said, well, when I was a young buck, you should have seen me. You put water in there with the air carbon dioxide, I'd make the whole bath boil. Now, I still am trying to convert to a limestone. There's a lime cycle. It's slowly, but it's asymptotic. Never gets there, but it's always trying to convert to a limestone. So when the waters come, again, it's the rains, and it penetrates. Remember, the free lime goes in the solution? The lime will say, hey, I'm an old man now, but before I re-release the moisture back to the atmosphere, could I have that carbon dioxide, because I'm still trying to convert back to a stone again. So it acts as a desiccant. It pulls it from the wall into itself and back to the atmosphere. And that's why, if you ever heard the term quicklime, think quick. Well, you think of Nicene Creed. God will judge the quick and the dead. Quick is a term for alive. So when you have quicklime, it's alive. It's alive. Guess what? It's alive. It's still alive. You know, if it's still dynamically, it has reacted, it's alive. And that is what is also a beautiful thing about why we don't want to bulldoze these buildings, because of the time and the trouble and the fact that you're killing a living thing. No, it's got life. It's still somewhat dynamically changing with everything. It adapts. Yes. Well, what we do is when we go in to see people about their structure and they have an issue, and they usually have an issue, that's why they called, we'd say, well, let's first look at what has been done, and when did you start having this problem, and then how do we call this fancy term, reverse previous inappropriate intervention. It's fancy, like, we got to tear all this elastomeric stucco off, or paint, So we have to take the paint off. That's one way. So usually it's to take off the offensive material. You could call me about it. We've done a million kind of paint strip jobs. We never, it's a lot of trouble, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. But it's something you could look at, and I have a card and everything here you could take, and at the end. Well, my email is very easy: help@repointing.com. HELP, help@repointing.com. So I've been in a long time. I got the URL, repointing.com.
What would be your general recommendation for those of us who maybe have these structures that have now been repointed with, Portland cement and at this point, if there's not active issues, like how would you generally counsel in situations like that if we're looking to keep something, for the future?
Yeah. So I would say on a case-by-case basis, I guess this is the thing, and believe me, I am so stretched on time. I mean, I'm not kidding you. Dan, I got to pinch myself. 2 years ago, I got back and forth with Aruba about their lighthouse. I said to my wife, I've never been to Aruba. And I said, I was thinking, I've never been to Aruba. Maybe you need a consultant. They're like, we were thinking this too. Next thing you know, I'm down there plastering the lighthouse with a crew from Dominica. Recently down to Amelia Island, Georgia, and around. I get called all over. Got to go to Florida in a couple of weeks to look at something. Well, anyway, I never get tired of it, really. I don't mind being a resource to you, but I'm like a sounding board. So if you had me out, I would just take what you've got, and I'm a frugal guy. Like, I'm not going to say, you have to reverse all this or the end of the world will come, and, whatever. I will, because who I have to help through is, I do a lot of churches. And churches means a lot of denominations. You got the 10 hangers-oners. that were there since 1740, you know, it's my family started this thing. And they won't leave, and they want that thing to stay, but they can't afford the $200,000 restoration again because there's the congregation's dwindling. So I'm often trying to come up with creative ways to keep the structure in a best state of repair until more information or money, you know, comes out, you know. So I can be a sounding board and maybe tell you what I think you got and what I think would be a prudent thing to do. And if it is a do-nothing approach, which I never finished the thing, when the guy from England, who was from the equivalent to our park service, English Heritage, he began that lecture in Canada. He said to the 300 consultants and me in the front row, in England, before we ever do anything to any of our cultural resources and historic structures, we always apply the 2-day rule first. And of course, everyone's getting their pad out. 2-day rule, what? You know, and he says, we say, if it was here yesterday, it will be here tomorrow. And that means don't rush into intervening and doing things because it's not going anywhere. And it's been like this for a long time. It's going to be here tomorrow. So a lot of times, the do-nothing approach and to think and be a conservative conservator and be careful about what you do and what you choose wisely, you know, love the Indiana Jones, you know, choose the chalice wisely, which you'll go. And so sometimes we can't afford to reverse cement and everything. They're tenaciously hanging on in there. They're ruining, you know, sometimes it causes damage even in brick building, soft salmon brick that was sandblasted and then pointed with cement. Yeah, you might really ruin the whole thing trying to get it out. So.
One of those dumb questions.
Oh, no question. It's dumb.
I was thinking right as you started to speak, is it possible to reproduce that same product here in the U.S.? Or
Yes.
Just use it naturally?
Okay, I wasn't going to tell you, but I'm going to let the cat out of the bag because I'm very proud about it. I don't even know what to do with it. Trust me, I'm making this, a lot of the stuff, I'm not making this up, this is for real. But I'm sort of, like I mentioned about going into business, I didn't have business school. I didn't go to famous Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania. So running a masonry business for 38 years and running a supply business now for 20, and a school, we've been running the Craftwork Training Center for 5. Well, here, I tasked my chemist and my conservator with the idea that, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. The Romans were mixing volcanic ash with lime and improving it. Why can't we do this, right? So of all the pozzolans, there's lists of things that have reactivity factors that some are like wickedly strong, others like, even colonists. If you ever go look at some of your historic structures, you'll say, why is there a slight pink hue to this joint? Because masons in the colonial days knew that brick dust, a clay, remember clay is our pozzolan, they'd add it to improve the strength, and then you get a little bit of a pink look to it. So of all the reactivity factors, we studied everything and we started doing tests. And it's kind of like where you want to know you have the answer first before you spend the money for real testing. Well, we came out, I'm on the ASTM committee for structural lime, American Side Testing Materials. And we came up with the term, not naturally occurring hydraulic lime, but PHL, sounds like Philly, airport, pozzolanic hydraulic lime. And we came up with the term, and then some people came right to the, see you later, thanks for coming, hope I didn't scare you. We came up with, pozzolanic hydraulic lime. Before the ink even dried, there were people already adding GGBS, the fly ash and crap in there. And it's just a wrong. There was no testing. So we came up with what we thought would be the right thing and kept manipulating it until we found what we thought was perfect. And then I spent like $40,000 sending it out to York to Intertech, one of the largest testing facilities in the world, because I knew that if I don't have third-party documentation that says it'll reach this and this and this and this and this, then litigation happens. You know, I have to have that proven, stamped, good. And I'm very proud to say that our pozzolanic hydraulic lime mirrors now what I import. I actually make it here in the United States. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do work with it. Matter of fact, because it's structural, it'll reach, like, in this material we have on the line, will reach type and strength with no cement. And because it's structural, people might lay bricks and stones. We didn't want to release it as a structural outside, but all of our top coat plaster, anything that's platinum means made in America. The plaster line, which is just interior, is made from the PHL, pozzolanic hydraulic line. And so, yes, we've been using it. And now where we're shipping it, where the East Coast is strong in historic preservation in all our old buildings. But I have friends that are friends for 20 years that know all about limes and everything. And they are on the Front Range in Colorado, and they do in New Mexico the adobes, and they build all those things. And they need the lime for also breathable properties. And we're going to move our PHL into warehouses there and into, Oregon and California. We're all green sustainable. So my talk won't be about as much as your old farmhouse. It's like, how are we going to lower the carbon footprint like yesterday? Because we're on the precipice of the danger zone. And this is 80% less, and you can use it for laying bricks, stones, plastering, stuccoing. And so what I say is, geez, God help me, because I do need somebody who knows how to take that to another level. I feel like don't. Right now it's the Coca-Cola secret. We keep it in the vault. But we worry about people. Somebody, big business, getting it and saying, well, now we've patented it and you can't use it. That kind of thing. So, really, truth is I am not even wanting. My spirit here is this. I don't even want to be a billionaire and capitalize on that stuff. I would rather that it's open source, but I don't want somebody to say, I can't make it. So I'd rather, in the final analysis, that the lights go on and people say, wow, can we make it? Can we make it? Yes, you can, you can, you can, you can. Because if everything switches as disruptive technology, cement disrupted lime, but I'm going to disrupt it back. And if you disrupt it back to lime, then if everyone is doing it, I don't mind that we have actually affected a great change, for all construction. So that's my next goal in life, now that I have heart surgery and I made it through it. Okay, I think I'm done. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.